All right, everybody, welcome to Catching Up. We're excited for this episode. We have been on hiatus for a little bit longer than 2 weeks, but we promise this is a good one. It's a long one, and I think you're going to love it, especially the music in the end. So I'm going to riff a little bit on connection. That seems to be a theme of our work. And then we're going to share a little bit about some partner work in Michigan and Virginia that we're doing that we're really excited about. It's been a busy fall. And then we're going to go deep on ambient AI, what happens when AI is all around you and what happens to your learning. So, Mason, what are you going to talk about?
Yeah, we talk about a lot about AI in this episode, so sorry to our listeners that are tired of that. But
We always talk about AI.
but our click rate and listen rates prove that you are all still interested. So hang with us. I share a story of some good news about an entrepreneurship program called Uncharted Learning. We also take a look at Alpha School, the 2-hour AI school day that is sweeping the media nation. And we talk a little bit about a recent blog post called The Day in the Life of an Educator in 2040 and some corresponding work we've been doing on that subject. So stick around. It's going to be a good one.
And hey, and we end with, like I said, great music and a story about French fries. So listen to the whole thing.
Catching up is all I ever do. Catching up.
Hey, Nate.
Hey, Mason,
It is great to see you. I have some very good news for you today.
what's the good news? I always like good news.
I think the good news is I think today we have our best song yet.
Oh, no kidding.
It is really good. And I'm a little bit worried about like getting sued for it, but I think Suno would be on the hook, not me. So it's very good. So I'm excited. Have you ever played Hurdle? It's the New York Times, it's like Wordle inspired, but it's by Spotify.
No, I haven't, but I am looking for more games because I just started the mini crossword puzzle and I'm very bad at it.
Hurdle is really hard. It plays you 1 second of a song and you have to guess the song. And then if you can't do that, you get 3 seconds of the song, and then you get 5 seconds of the song. So I think we need the Hurdle technologist to design our
Oh,
unlock.
that's really good. I could probably, after maybe 5 seconds, keep the tune going, but I'm not sure
Okay.
that I'm not sure I could ever guess the name of the artist. That would be my problem.
I think that means you're as good as Suno. I think that's what Suno does. I don't think they could tell you what the song was either, but they could keep it going for sure.
So Nate is at least equivalent to Suno at that level. Well, no, we got to test it first.
I've got a little good news story for us today. I think we're going to try to incorporate more of these into
Yes,
the
we need
podcast.
more good news,
We need
Mason.
more good news. Yeah, we both love good news. We think that's kind of core to what Getting Smart does. Is we're sort of sharing good news from around the ecosystem. So this one comes to us from our friends at Uncharted Learning, who have this really cool Incubate EDU incubator program that is in a bunch of high schools across the country that empowers young people to do entrepreneurial pursuits, everything from write a book to create board games to start a nonprofit. It's kind of all over the map. And they sent me this press release recently from a group of students that are in McAllen ISD in Texas. And they noticed that all of their peers were drinking energy drinks like crazy. And they're like, this is so not healthy for anybody. Like this, and it's expensive. It's just not a great idea. So they decided to try and copy this popular Mexican candy that's like a chelado gummy snack that's coated in, I think it's pronounced camoy. It's like a pickled fruit flavoring that's on mangoes a lot and these little
Wait,
candies.
let's stop for a second and just describe that one more time for
Okay.
our audience.
So picture a gummy bear.
Yeah, I got it. Okay.
Okay. And so you've got a gummy bear, and this gelato is like a type of a gummy snack that they're often making.
Okay,
And
got it.
Kamoya is like a pickled fruit flavor. So
Okay,
it is
got it.
often, it's like, you've seen it probably on the outside of a mango. It's like a red gel. It's kind of like, it got a little bit, almost like a Tajin-esque chili kind of flavor to it. So they are making these gummy bears that are mimicking a popular snack, and they're imbuing it with all this like energy stuff that you can find in an energy drink. And so you really only need a couple of what they call boosties, which are these little gummies that they're now producing in a factory and selling to all their classmates to try and bypass the energy drink craze. So
All right.
I think there's probably some questionable health results in either of them. You're still making something that is very sweet and gummy, but I think it's a pretty exciting way to spot the problem and deliver value, all fueled by entrepreneurship education. So love to see
And
it.
I think the branding on that is really good.
Boosties is fantastic.
That is very clever, and I love that students are doing it. And I mean, hey, if it has a little bit less sugar in it than the regular drink, which
Totally.
often has tons of sugar and tons of caffeine, but still the same effect, there you
Yeah.
go. A couple things that I that were on my list that I wanted to share. So one is this idea. We've talked a lot about this, but it just continues to come across my feeds around what does human connection look like, and how are things like AI and social media distracting from connection, or maybe that some people would argue it's enhancing connection. And so there's an article in Brookings in July that gives an overview of this, but just talking about how more and more young people are creating companionship with some sort of AI tool. And I think it's going to get better and better. And we talked before about things like Replica and these video avatars. So that's not new. And the thesis there, the argument is that there's a lot of different apps that are out there. There's more and more opportunities to join them. More and more people, not just young people, are using them for relationships. The data suggests that some people who are lonely at first may be less lonely, but also those who were not lonely at first may be more lonely, right? So you may be solving for a part of humanity that feels lonely by giving them an AI bot, but then there's a vast majority of people who are feeling more lonely. So what they're arguing though is this idea that we need to train teachers in relational intelligence, so that technology is used in order to enhance human relationships, not to displace human relationships. So it's a design principle and not a side effect. And so they talk about this idea of if school wasn't just a place for academic readiness, which it should continue to be, but also a place for, I'm going to use the word relational readiness. They use the word relational hub. So do we need effort in training teachers in connection as much as we need them trained in teaching ELA or math or science or other pedagogy? So I just was fascinated by that, and that in some ways we think about ourselves as teachers that relationships are important and connections are important, but I'm wondering how specific and intentional we now need to be with these other things that are distracting. So thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely sounds like AI is a catalyst for this. And at the same time, this feels like a skill that teachers at their best should always have, right? Like this does feel like similar to what you were just saying. It's always been a very important part of what it is to be a teacher, is to have relationships and be able to help young people develop them. Right when AI sort of was burgeoning, we were all like, how is this going to make us more human in the end? And I think that these kinds of questions start to get at that. It's like it's asking us to do an inventory of what matters. It is redesigning something that has always been set in stone and hard to change, unflinching. And yeah, I'm super excited that teachers would be getting more relational intelligence. Part of me wonders if relational intelligence feels like an add-on when like relationships feels like something that's already a part of the description. So I
Yeah.
wonder if how much of this is trying to come up with a silver bullet for something that in theory has always been right in front of us.
Right. So maybe it's a reminder that in this age of digital connection, we need to really hammer down on that relationships piece. And I remember Tony Wagner would write about the 3 R's, right? Relevance, relationships, and rigor. And so you're right. So great teachers know how to build great relationships. When we're implementing technology or AI gets implemented in the schools, the argument here from Brookings is we actually have to focus on that, but also
Yep.
think about what technology is doing to distract us from that and teach those connection skills. So yeah,
and to
interesting.
note and to notice where there might be a deficiency. Like maybe what this does is it actually nuances how we define relationship. And you have a student come in who maybe has been engaging with the technology tool mostly, and you're like, oh, they seem like they have a surplus of this kind of a signifier from a good relationship, which is maybe like they always have someone to talk to. They have like all this
Yeah.
stuff, but they're really missing in this other department. Maybe they have like a really low self-esteem or something. And you're like, some part of this relationship equation isn't working. So it might be learning how to spot that and then deliver in the places where it's not currently being met.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
it
And,
could be intelligence
and
after all.
maybe we'll come back to that when we talk later on about this idea of ambient AI, because I'm thinking about how do you actually discern this in
Yeah,
individuals. But so that was something
love
that
it.
came across. Two other ones that are short. So NAEP scores came out. So it's National Assessment of Educational Progress. Everybody said that they were not very good. We have a lot of challenges in literacy and in mathematics in terms of what's being measured on this test. Now, as we've talked about before, it could be that students aren't engaged or they're not putting their full effort in. There's all sorts of confounding factors, and we talked about those in a previous pod. But one of the 74 million had a article that came out that I thought was interesting and thought provoking around so about 2/3 of students on NAEP are at or below basic in literacy, right?
Hmm.
And so when you are at basic in literacy, it means that you can actually read. And so you could read a street sign or you could read basic. So the basic reading fluency is there. But what the challenge is in that group is that the higher level skills of analysis and critical thinking are more challenging. So on the NAEP, they ask questions of all different types, like can you read, but also can you analyze and critically think, et cetera. And so the article was making this argument of it's not that students can't read, it's that they can't read at a level that helps them discern and unpack and decipher all these claims in the media world. And they were going back to sort of pseudoscience and the world that's out there that the students are ingesting through
Right.
TikTok and Instagram, right? And they're how do you quickly decipher this? And you need analytical skills, you need critical thinking skills. And yet a huge number of young people are not developing those. And so I think it was a little bit of a call to action of, it's not just literacy, like functional literacy, it's this idea of civic literacy, and we'll even add media literacy, this idea of being able to interpret and analyze the world when you have so much coming at you at one time. So just important to note as everyone's pulling their hair out about NAEP scores is that there's a bigger issue here around sort of critical thinking, et cetera, that I know we've talked about before.
Yeah, super important. Good flag.
Yeah. And then the last one, just to a little shout out, is that we are doing, it's been a busy fall for us here at Getting Smart. And we've done we're doing these two big launches, our continued work in Michigan with Future Learning Council, a really great partner that has done so much work in Michigan to amplify the future of learning and really focus on personalized competency-based learning and really helping districts. They have about 60 districts plus 20 or so ISDs. They're all working together in partnership to try to move a model forward that better engages students to get better outcomes using increasing relevance, competency-based, et cetera. And in Virginia, a group called Valen, same kind of thing. It's a high school redesign group, and there's about 20 divisions that are involved with a bit more number of high schools that are in it, so 29 or so high schools. And all those schools are thinking about high school redesign. How do we rethink high school? So I've been thinking a lot about sort of the coalition of the willing lately, and this idea that both these groups are optional groups. It's not, someone's not forcing them to do it. And I'm thinking a lot about this ground up work is how do we get the coalition of willing to lead the way in U.S. education to really transform learning? So we're excited to work with both those partners of ALEN in Virginia and FL Future Learning Council in Michigan, and super appreciative of all the hard work that they've done there to set some great foundations for good learning experiences.
That's great. Yeah, appreciate the shout. And I'm sure our listeners can tell that we've had a busy fall because we've had very few catching up episodes. So apologies to our listeners for the delayed release between them.
Yes, we will. We'll get better. I think we're getting, things are now settling down. I hope so. We'll get back on our 2-week schedule. So
I hope so too. Yeah, cool. Those are great shares. Thank you, Nate.
Let's start with a deep dive. Why don't you take us with the work on Alpha?
I'm sure that all of our listeners have now heard of Alpha School. I feel like
they do a really good publication and promotion, so that's for sure.
They definitely are sinking resources into promotion. Yeah, they're everywhere. And I wanted to talk about it a little bit because I think there was this really big article published in Colossus a few weeks ago with the brain behind Alpha and the technology. And it gave me kind of a peek behind the curtain to some stuff I wasn't really aware of beforehand. I had known the 2-hour AI school day, the ways in which they were thinking about it, augmenting learning, not replacing learning and instruction. But I got a couple things I just want to share about this, and then I have a few questions for you, and just to see what you think. So I think first and foremost, Alpha School on paper is working. So Alpha School has been tested in a bunch of schools, in a couple of schools in Texas. And if you take all the K-8 scores from the students in Alpha School, they're ranking in the top 1% nationally with growth rates in the 90th percentile. And the SAT scores were like super high. It was like 1535 out of 1600. So it is working on paper in the ways in which we've had to measure success in the past.
Yeah. And just as a quick reminder, though, to everyone listening is, yes, it's working on paper for the cohort of students that are there. And we have to remember that this is a selective private school. So this is not a sampling of all students. It is a very specific cohort of students that are typically in the gifted and talented range. Just putting it out there. Yeah.
No, that's super important. And to Alpha's, I guess, future credit, they are rolling out in a public model for a little bit to continue to test this iteration. So I think they have some visibility into that. But correct, that is the data as it stands. This article showed me a couple things though. So one, there's this tool called Time Back, which is really like the kind of the secret sauce of the Alpha School 2 hour day. And what this does is it is trying to adjust for students' anti patterns. So, what that means is it's habits that are making learning much less effective, whether that's something as mundane as spinning in your chair or checking Instagram to something that apparently is a little bit more of a problem in ed tech spaces, which is topic shopping. I think I'm very guilty of this in my browser sometimes, where if I have like three things that would require too much energy, I just sort of click between them for about 3 minutes until I realize I'm doing that. And then I'm like, oh, it's time to actually commit to one of these.
Ooh,
So
interesting.
yeah, so it's monitoring this kind of engagement from students, and it's actually doing it in a kind of dystopian way. It's got this vision model that's actually watching the user, and then the whole time it's funneling all this information into what they call a waste meter. So it's showing students at the end how much potential free time they're losing if they don't actually complete their lessons within the 2 hours. So it's this really like hyper efficient, hyper optimized system that over time will just continue to get better and better. And he spoke a lot about video games and the influence of TikTok on some of the ways that they're designing these tools. So the goal is really to track what is working in engagement in like the broadest sense, like all of the tools that are at disposal, and to funnel it into this thing that almost like tricks people into learning in this 2 hour time period. Not to necessarily use that word negatively, but just like you're not, I think you're not supposed to necessarily be aware that you're learning in some of this time. So that's really interesting. It happens in 2 hours. And then they say there's another 6 hours of the day to get your childhood back, to go do things that are more real world and more immersive. So I have two core questions for you. I think one of them is on what do we do with these other 6 hours? Like, if you've got these 2 hours in the morning for all these core classes and basic literacies, what are you doing with the other six? And and tell me if I'm just being a little bit like boy who cried wolf on this, but can you make learning too addictive? Like that, I know people who don't exercise unless they have the watch on to track the exercise because then it doesn't count. And so there's a concern for me that's like if you are not actually within this optimized environment that you've become used to the kind of incentives and rewards that actually that defeats the purpose over time and you only want to learn in that kind of environment. So feel free to start with whichever one, but those are my two big questions after this story.
Okay, I have a lot of questions. I'm going to push back. I'm going to comment on these, but I want to push back first. Would you put a time back video on your computer to help you do better every day, especially if it was just for you, meaning the like Getting Smart wouldn't see it. It was just for you. Would you do it or not do it?
I don't think I'd do it.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think that I learn well under those conditions, and I'm not sure it would tell me something about myself that I don't already know.
Right. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. I am not sure either. I think
yeah,
it feels very surveillance like. It could be interesting, but like you said, I'm already pretty self aware of, like you said, when you're flipping back and forth between three decisions, you just have to move forward. Right. That was my question. The other 6 hours. So I think that I'll tackle that question first. Is that I do think that especially in the younger grades, play is important, and probably some sort of version of play in the older grades. We've lost that a little bit. I do think that passion projects or student directed learning with appropriate structure. So by appropriate structure, it might mean if you're in the public sector, you've got to meet science outcomes and social studies outcomes and all these things that are not ELA and math related. And maybe you are creating, or AI is helping you create learning experiences that you're interested in, co-design, and then connecting them to these other various outcomes that you need to meet. So sort of a passion project, self-directed learning type work. So some
yeah,
play, passion project, self-directed learning. And then I think the that connects with real world learning, but some sort of contribution type piece. And you and I have talked a lot about contribution. And it could be work-based learning where you're going into a workplace at the older grades and learning what that's like. And that's less contribution. So I might say experience the world as an adult, like what, just to sort of test out some things. But also there's a part of it that's about contribution. And so I think that needs to fill up the day as well. I think there needs to be a lot of time spent working in teams, learning how to connect, like we talked about before, and practicing that connection. I'd like to see times where there's no technology involved, so students can continue to think about that. So those are the things that I would fill up. Honestly, the other pieces, and this is dependent on family and work situations, but if you can in any way buy back family time, if the family is a good place for you and that there's time, that like that's a powerful thing as well, I think,
Mm,
because often everyone's working and there's no time. Kids come home from school, they have to do homework, and there's just no time to connect or sit down as a family and eat a meal together or whatever the case may be. So,
yeah.
and I recognize that like that can't happen with every family with different jobs and things like that. But so that's how I would use that 6 hours.
Oh,
So that's the incentive to put
yeah,
a time back machine on my
that's true.
device because I'm going to get all my work done in 2 hours. Now that's actually a great add-on. We should figure out how to make that happen because it feels
Yeah.
like it's an infinite list at work, to be honest.
Yeah, for sure. That is the
Um,
that is the one to solve.
yeah, yeah. So that's my first one. And then can learning become too addictive? I mean, probably because let's think about gaming, right? So gaming is learning. You're learning how to master a particular set of challenges. And I'm not a gamer, but
Right.
but those are learning. You're training your brain to do something, and they certainly are addictive because of the leveling up and the gamification. So can it become too addictive? If it helps you become a better person and it helps you make the world a better place, I don't
Right.
actually care if people are addicted to that. That's my personal piece. What do you
Yep.
think?
There are so many. I was really hung up on the fact that it's being modeled after things like TikTok, which I feel like right now we kind of don't have the best interpretation of what social media has done to our brains, whether that be
Right.
attention spans, whether that be bridging get difference. And so using that technology as an example of what you're trying to build freaks me out a little bit, to be totally honest. Like
Right.
it does feel a little bit like the endlessness of the feed, and also sort of the illusion of learning. Like the amount of the
Mm,
people that I know that spend a lot of time on social media and always have things to share, but they feel kind of out of context. It's kind of more like a pull quote. It's sort of like, and I think that Alpha School, because it's personalized and modular, and of course that'll be a little different, that'll probably be nested within context. But I do think that without application, learning can become too addictive. I think learning can actually be
yeah.
a paralyzing force rather than an enabling one if you're not scaffolding it correctly with opportunities to actually do something with it. So that's my hope for the 6 hours in the day, is that that's what that's for. And
Mm,
I'm not actually that. I think that the 2 hours of this kind of focused learning and then 6 hours of experiential and relational learning is actually like a pretty beautiful portrait of what school could be in the future. Like I think that that breakdown makes sense to how my brain interprets what was the most impactful parts of school. And yet I just anything that claims to be a silver bullet, I just get a little bit wary of.
as you
And
should. As you should.
yeah, and I'm super interested to see what comes out of these 2 hours though, because they're going to have a lot of data. So
Yeah, yeah, and I suspect. I mean, I think I read the same article, and this is a $1 billion investment with a couple hundred employees working on this. This is a back end, a startup that no one talks about. That's really
yeah,
thinking about the operating system for education and what does it look like. One other thought I was thinking about is I'm not convinced that the 2 hours has to be in a single block. I'm sure they are convinced of that because that's the
right,
way the structure is, but really the power is you can satisfy your ability to learn math and your ability to read and write in a 2 hour time period. Whether or not that has to be blocked, I don't know. I mean, some students might be better working for 15 minutes and then going to go run around for 45 minutes and then repeat
totally.
that, for the rest of the day. So I think that there's some variations on this, but I do think we're going to see more and more, especially around core skill acquisition, the stuff that's usually tested on standardized tests, which may or may not stay the same, but that will become more and more AI and personalized.
Yeah,
I'm continuing to think that that's important. So it goes. We had a prior conversation about how do we help educators adjust to really work on that 6 hour other part of the day, and I think that's really important. So
me
um,
too. And I think that my closing thought on this is just to kind of continue to weave conversations we've been having on these and off of these. But like if there's this moment where a student is learning for 2 hours and it is very data rich and it is very evidence full, I think that actually makes it more important than ever to find ways to capture and credential the rest of that learning day, or
yeah,
else it
yeah,
loses value and validity. And that has the chance to actually augment the gap we already see between real world
mm,
learning and normal learning, where it's like real world learning is so hard to prove, to explain, to articulate, whereas it could, because it's outside of the bounds of what we've always known to be learning in some ways, or always known in quotes, like defined as learning. So I just think
right.
that this is a big occasion to continue to invest in those technologies and figure out how the heck are we going to tell the story of an internship in a world of surveillance for 2 hours a day.
Yeah, right. You could see a place where you have 1,000 times more data in your ELA and math
Right,
than
exactly.
than your 6 hours in the rest of the day. And
Correct.
so well, I think that's interesting. I think it's a good segue into this my next piece, which is a nice natural
Love it.
transition here. Is that so the GSV Ventures, which is part of it's the GSV part of ASU GSV in terms of the big conference, and it happens every spring. They're a venture firm that focuses on education and do a lot of ed tech stuff. And I shared with the rest of Getting Smart, I think we all saw it. They do this forecast every year, and this is the forecast for learning and earning in 25, 26.
Yep.
We'll put it in the show notes. It's really, really good and a great thought-provoking document for any school leadership team or a group of innovative teachers to jump into and talk about, because there's a lot of thought-provoking stuff here.
There is.
And this is about 25, 26. This is a 1-year prediction. So it's just really interesting. But the one that I thought that was most interesting was this, the name of the chapter, AI is Air dash Ambient AI in every breath, step, and swipe. So I'm going to actually read the actual few sentences because it's really articulate. So it says, with ambient AI, assessment becomes continuous. A classroom debate, a customer service call, or a lab presentation can all feed into dynamic profiles of skills and growth. Done right, the shift could measure real learning and impactful feedback. Done wrong, it risks turning schools and workplaces into surveillance states. The long-term outcome, skills become the substrate. Competency graphs will travel with learners from K-12 into careers more predictive than a GPA or even a degree. Everyday artifacts of work become evidence of mastery. So this is what you and I have been talking about, right? Like this idea of, in our framework, we call it the learning ecosystem. Everything around is possibilities. So that's the where part of our framework. And then the for whom is all about the signaling and credentialing. And so it's combining the for whom and the where elements of our framework. But I hadn't heard this word ambient AI before. And I'm going to ask you a couple questions around it. Is the 2 bullet points that were important were this idea of us building shadow profiles. And so when we collect data about our learning, we're suddenly building a shadow profile. And this is no different than our advertising media profile that we all have. We all have a stunt double out there that's everything that we browse, everything that we buy, that's built up there. I have this vision of these zeros and ones that look like me that are just stacked all together, and that it's like for sale on the market, and I have no control over it. So this idea of a shadow profile of learning is real, and it's already happening with people's. If you're on Khan Academy, you're storing data there, and then that jumps into this idea of a learning operating system, which is integrating everything into the single profile. So my question is like, how do we deal with this in the 6-hour? What does this look like in the 6-hour day? I mean, how can we imagine if someone's out, or can you imagine someone's out playing with a bunch of buddies on the field? They're playing frisbee, but they're learning something along the way.
Of course.
Do you want ambient AI, this learning operating system, to be tracking that and saying, "Hey, Mason, you just actually solved the challenge between these two of your friends who are about to fight over a frisbee. Ding, ding, ding," and there's a little alarm that goes off somewhere, and you get some points. Like, how far do we want to take this, Mason?
Ooh, that is a big old question. In my past life of marketing, I got really close to those shadow profiles. So that's not quite a 0-1 example of Nate, but right. I could probably tell you more about you than you gave me based on a shadow profile.
Right.
I'm really torn. So I think there's two versions of this. One that actually fits more into I think what we've historically described as assessment as a way of actually seeing the shadow. And then one that is maybe more kind of leaning into the surveillance version. So the first one, I really am bullish that I think a lot of the first touches going forward with admissions, with employment, et cetera, is actually going to be a simulation rather than a person. And so you're going to say, I want this job, apply, and that's going to prompt a simulation type experience where you have to be able to demonstrate capability in a scenario. And I think people who are designing those simulations will actually be able to do that in a way that captures a pretty well-rounded view of like some of your durable skills, some of your abilities, And I think through that, it might be able to actually let you scaffold some of this evidence onto maybe your readout at the end. Maybe it
Mm.
says something like, you were really good under pressure in that. Like, tell me about something that made you feel like you're good under pressure. I think we're going to come up with new ways to do kind of collaborative storytelling with some of these AI tools that actually make it, that don't make it harder to tell your story, but I think is actually going to add some additional challenges and validation down the road, because we all might be too good at telling stories with
Right.
generative AI tools. So that's one thing. I think that you can, rather than always capturing what you're doing, I think we're going to be in more of a world of like a prove it kind of world, and that might be the prove it.
Yeah.
So that's one. The surveillance version, I mean, I keep thinking of the like early Google Glass type days of having
Right.
something, and I could imagine there being a combination that is less, not like a satellite watching you from above and being like, "Oh, congratulations, you did this thing," but instead being some sort of biometric wearable that is doing some like maybe low frame rate capturing of your life, and maybe monitoring like biometric data at the same time to be like, "Oh, like that was a exciting moment that you just had, like reflect on it or something." So I think there will be
Mm.
a way to embed data capture in a life that's non-obstructive and doesn't actually ruin the moment you're having. But I think a lot of people are going to opt out at that of that system. And that I'm worried about who that harms in the long term, because we have a lot of these issues, not to make it like overtly political, but there's a lot of conversations being had about surveillance here for safety. And the
Right.
communities that don't want surveillance are often the most marginalized communities. And so if the
Right.
way these tools roll out feels more like surveillance, I think a lot of them are going to opt out, and that will really harm them in any chances of economic mobility or communicating what they can and can't do. And so I think
Yeah.
the challenge gets additionally sticky beyond what's possible into like, how do we make that accessible and something that everybody actually benefits from, rather than some people run away due to thinking three steps down the road of what could happen. So
I think yeah, that's really interesting. And I think that there's something about, probably we've talked about self-sovereignty before, but there has to be user control. So
totally.
certainly user opt-out. Not everybody has to have it. That may be problematic if the entire employability ecosystem works to, hey, you need to do your submission via some whatever
Right.
it is. We need to see your lifetime learning. And then maybe there's a in my head I'm thinking just an on-off switch, right? Like
Mm,
there's something like, hey, I'm doing this thing right now that might be really important for me to capture the skill. I'm going to go do a job interview, click, and I'm going to actually record it. But I control it, right? And so and maybe it would be an app on the phone. It's like in the surveillance world, it would be, I'm turning on surveillance and I'm turning off surveillance. But
right.
it's on my device. I trying to think of how you get users to control it and still give advantages to those who might really benefit from something like this, you know?
Well, I wonder, there's two examples that are coming to mind that feel like an early stage attempt at not this, but like I could see it being a leading technology into what this might look like. So back when Facebook was a thing people used a lot, my dad always checked in places just to kind of like remind himself where he'd been. But like that was a Facebook feature where you could be like, Scott Pasha checked in at like the Busch Gardens, Florida or something.
Oh, right,
Like
right, right.
it was
Yeah.
sort of a way to map where you've been. So there might be a way where it is more voluntary in that way, where you're like, okay, like I'm here. And then maybe something afterward, like maybe it's a couple hour window based on the kind of experience that you're likely to be having at that location. And then it's like, how was it? What'd you learn? Like, what'd you do? And it's not quite so, I'm going to film you doing this. Similarly, I feel like we create a paper trail a lot with, especially in like entertainment, anything that's ticketed. Like if you have your Apple Wallet, you've got flights, you have like ticket stubs, you have all kinds of things that are sort of digitally saved in a digital
Mm,
wallet already.
yeah.
So there might just be an interface with those that similarly will give you a little nudge afterwards. Not too dissimilar from a survey, but more to serve you rather than the provider.
Right.
It's like, tell me about this experience. Like, who'd you go with? Was it great? And then you can be like, yeah, I saw this great band and I loved this thing. And over time, maybe those stack into something, but I don't know. That's just riffing. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think we just need to pay attention to it. I think the idea of ambient AI is going to become more and more prevalent,
right.
not just in learning, but across the world that we live in. And so I think the fact that it showed up and the fact that it came up in our first conversation, right, around 2 hour learning and what happens with the 6 hours rest of the day.
Yeah.
And it's come up over and over is like, how do we capture this learning ecosystem? So you and I have this vision of we got to expand the learning ecosystem. Learning happens everywhere. And that's really laudable and important. And I think, and how do we do this in a way that maintains sovereignty of the data and self-sovereignty for the learner themselves, so that they gain the advantages, but they don't have the drawbacks of being surveilled all the time. So
Totally.
interesting. Okay.
Super.
I think we have time for one more. So I'm gonna ping it back to you. Day in the life. Just talk quickly about that.
Okay, so we've been writing this series about imagining different kind of stakeholders of learning in the year 2040. So we've done a few perspectives from learners, and we've got a couple more in the queue from a bunch of different perspectives. But we recently published one on a day in the life of an educator in 2040, and this was kind of a culminating resource after our recent work with Ed3DAO, a great organization that we've been working with on a portrait of a teacher in the age of AI, which has been a really fun project. It's kind of let us get under the hood of what are the teacher competencies of today, who's defining them, and then what are the teacher competencies of tomorrow, and kind of what is AI doing in between. And then we put them all together and try to make an assessment about what is the actual role of a teacher going forward. And so we've had a lot of fun. Check out the article if you want a first person account from 2040. We did not travel to 2040, just full disclaimer. We looked at a couple different things. We looked at competencies and skills that were represented in these frameworks. We looked at roles and responsibilities that tended to be captured within the job description of modern day educators. And it was a really compelling look at which of these things are going to hold constant, which of them are going to get less important as AI enters the picture, or less human emphasis, and then which of them are going to be like doubly important that humans spend time with and get really skilled in. Kind of similar, honestly, to what you were talking about earlier with the relational intelligence. Like that would be an interesting example to throw into the pot for what do people need to be good at. So we learned a lot. Nate, what did you learn from this project?
Yeah, I mean, I think that idea that we settled on, this idea of machine emphasis versus human emphasis,
Yeah.
as we started thinking about what does the future of education look like, and we were modeling it off Horizon 3, or a transformational model of what that looks like, and where would machines play a bigger role, in this case AI, the machine that we were thinking about, and where would humans play an important role. And I think some of the stuff was as we predicted, around things like lesson planning and learning experience design, assessment. All those things are going to become more and more machine driven, and then things that involve relationships will become more and more human driven, especially things that are real world experiences, going back to the 6 hours the rest of the day kind of thing, right? So it was fun to break it down, though, in relationship to the existing competencies and skills that describe teachers in various frameworks from around the world, and then the roles and responsibilities that we pulled out from job descriptions. I think the end results will be, over the course of the next 6 months, is producing something that's a useful tool for anybody who's thinking about what skills should a teacher know in the present and moving forward over the next, whatever, 5 to 10 years, as AI becomes more and more ubiquitous. I think the other thing that it made me think about, and I need someone to really push back on me for this. So if there's a listener out there that's like, Nate, you are totally off base on this. There are great examples of this, but I still think we have a sparse landscape in education schools. So these are in the undergraduate setting, those who want to become teachers. How are those programs adapting to an age of AI that's emerging? And not only an age of AI, but an age of AI and a transformational model. So let's say both of those things hold true. Some of this learner studio work that has been talking about what is a transformational model in the age of AI. And I think because universities work really, really slowly to change coursework, they're not super nimble places, is that the programs of study are actually preparing young people for an expiring vision of what education could be. Doesn't mean it's going to go away. And things like classroom management and teaching literacy and teaching math, those are going to be some important skills and basic pedagogy of a classroom. I just think we need an actual big redesign. And we're see a little bit in graduate schools, like High Tech High's graduate school. ISTE has a AI for Tomorrow's Teachers. 2Revs has a graduate program now on competency-based, CBE-focused masters. There, USC Rossier has a master's in AI and learning design. So there are some things out there, but they're typically masters. And what I'm really interested in is who is going to be the first ed program beyond the relays and high-tech highs and ASUs and ISTEs that will really fundamentally redesign. Just like we're redesigning K-12, who's going to do that in ed in one of these big universities that is serving tons and tons of teachers every year? Because I think right now we may be doing a disservice.
Totally agree.
So that's my takeaway from this is I hope schools of ed will look at this resource once it's built and do some mirror looking and say, we need to do some redesign.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I think the other takeaway, just because it never hurts to say it, is after doing this, it reaffirmed our assumptions that teachers do a lot, and they are asked to do
Yeah.
a lot of different things. And I think that is, in some ways, proof that it will not be, not that people are trying to replace teachers, but it would not even be easy to replace teachers. So many of their roles and responsibilities are multifaceted, varied, incredibly human, incredibly technical. Like they're all over the maps, and they usually ask for a lot of them at the same time. But this work really illustrated that we ask a lot of our educators. And so for all of our educators listening, thank you very much.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like it is a lot to help a human being grow, right? And develop. So agree with you completely. So, hey, that was a ton of stuff here. I'd love to and I want to start doing some school shout outs. So we often do examples of schools, but I want to just add a section on just specific schools. And those listeners out there, if you have something worth highlighting and we haven't done it yet and Getting Smarter, you want to shout out on the show, please let us know. We're really thinking about schools that are pushing new learning models with really good results and thinking deeply about human learning and what it looks like. So the one I want to talk about today really quickly is down in Livingston, Alabama, University Charter School. I've been involved with them since they started. So they've been around for 5, 6, 7 years now. And I was involved with them before they even started. And they are a combination of really strong academics because it's an area that really Alabama has a challenge with sort of literacy and math scores. And they really defeated that challenge and said, we're going to actually change the paradigm there. So they've done that. And they're a school that focuses on connecting learners to local places. They're a place-based school. That's how I got connected with them. And they've been doing this internally. And they've started over the last 2 years something called the U Prep program, which now they're trying to impact the schools that are surrounding them and now broader in Alabama. And I really applaud this idea of scaling once you have a model that works so you can impact more than just your own students. And it's hard work. And that's why we put it in our framework as there is a scaling section in our framework, because we think that when you have something that works, it should be scaled and more people should look at it. And in fact, the schools that they worked with, the vast majority of schools which did this 2-year cycle, their outcomes improved as well, which is really, really interesting to see in this preliminary data. So just kudos to schools out there who are not only focused inward and done great work to create transformational experiences, but then focus outward to share with others who are also in need to just increase access to great models. So University
Amazing.
Charter School, Livingston, Alabama.
That's amazing. Great shout.
All right, uniquely human. Let's close with some humanness.
Some humanness. I mean, so I've been kind of vaguely house hunting lately. So I've been going to a lot of open houses and touring houses. And it's a really interesting reminder of just the footprints of humans, the marks we leave along the way. I've been, you go in a house and in the basement in this weird corner, there's like the classic height marking of like the family that lived there before you. There's just like Seattle, like its property is quite expensive. So the plots are often smaller, and that makes people get really creative with how they do their yards. So there will just be like these super weird parts of a yard that you can tell someone made that way just so they could like bring a chair out and sit there. And so it's just really lovely to see the kind of oddities and intricacies of being a human through the lens of a house and not actually necessarily even through encountering them. So
yeah, like it's the shadows of the past in some ways that are there. When we've moved once in our life, and when we took the sideboard that had all the markings on it, so we could take it to our new house and put it up.
That's
In the house that I grew up in. This is another footprint, is that it was an old New England house. I grew up in a old farmhouse in Massachusetts, and there was an old well that was in the corner of the kitchen that actually I didn't know existed when I was growing up. My dad had built cabinets around it, kitchen cabinets. But when my parents sold the house, the new people thought it was really interesting. And so they put a plexiglass covering as part of their counter. And they put a light down the bottom of the well. And you could turn on a little switch and you could look all the way down this old stone, old New England well. It was super clever and interesting. And so when I went back to visit the house, I was like, what's this? I didn't realize this was here. And my dad's like, yeah, that's been there the whole time. I just covered it up with a cabinet and put drawers around it and things like that. So,
Wow, that's so
so
cool.
so footprints for sure. Yeah, really interesting. I love that the footprints of humans that are not necessarily real footprints, right? But different types
Yeah.
of footprints. So I my last one, just to finish this off before this music, which I'm waiting for, is I was traveling a couple weeks ago and I was helping someone who was their shoulders weren't working right. I left the plane and I went to sit down and I was sitting at one of those tables and an elderly woman came over and sat down and she had a big plate of fries and a hamburger and I was just working on my computer and she looks up and she's like, "Hey, do you want some of my French fries? I just had way too many." And it's just this idea of sharing with a stranger, this concept. And I was like, that doesn't happen very much. And
No.
it made me smile and it made me think, all right, well, I helped that person with luggage and this person offered me French fries. And if everybody did these random acts of kindness, which I know everybody talks about, and we all try to do it, I do think the world becomes better and better slowly and slowly. So
Totally.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the next wearable technology that makes that easier rather than harder. I feel like if I have headphones in at the airport, I miss like 20% of the opportunities for helping people.
Yeah,
And so I'm looking forward to some sort of transparency that lets me be more a part of the world than apart from it.
Yeah, and then you can click on your Ambient AI device and then say, "Oh, look, I offered French fries to someone," and then your compassion index goes up, and then
Way up.
and then you get points, and then those points go into your digital wallet, and then you can, and then you can, and then you can.
And then everyone's way nicer because they know they get points for it. Peloton for kindness.
Peloton for kindness. Yeah, exactly. All right,
okay.
maybe not in our lifetime. Let's finish with some
Maybe
music,
not.
Mason. What do you have for me?
I got a song for you. Get
Okay.
ready. Here we
I'm
go.
ready.
Another day, another lesson. The teacher drones on a fight, digression, turkeys apart dream, while data streams all clean. I gotta focus, gotta strive to simply stay alive. Catching up is all I ever do. Catching up to something shiny and new. Catching up stacked high is all I ever do. Equations dancing in dizzy haze. Catching up to something shiny and new.
Oh my gosh, that's a really good one.
It's pretty great. That chorus has been stuck in my head for days.
Catching up. Oh man, that is outstanding. The influence of that one, I all I could imagine was like a smoky bar with someone singing at the front of the bar. So like, 20s blues club, not blues, jazzy type stuff.
Yeah.
But it's got a pop part to it too. So maybe you used a contemporary artist. I don't know.
I did lo-fi groove, and then I specified lead instrument as harpsichord. So that I think is the like kind of jangly
intro.
Yeah, which is actually kind of hip. So anybody else who wants to use harpsichord as a lead, do it. But no, that transition into the chorus is like so Billie Eilish, and like
That,
all
yeah,
of
yeah.
the phrasing is like very Ariana Grande, and it's just like, wow.
Yeah, it's listening out there and starting to aggregate the most popular stuff into what you think is a novel creation into something that really is an aggregation of those that are most famous.
And then they're like, but we didn't actually train on any real artists. So and you're like, right. So yeah, wild. Anyway, great episode today, Nate. Always good to catch up and great to see you.
Yeah, good to catch up. We'll see you in a couple weeks.
Thanks for tuning in to the Getting Smart podcast today. We want this podcast to be actionable, insightful, and a great way to learn about what's next in learning. In order to stay on the cutting edge, we need people in the field to tell us what they're hearing, what they're wanting, and what they're needing to learn more about. Got a topic or a guest in mind? Send your recommendations to me, Mason at gettingsmart.com. And if you like what you're hearing, don't forget to leave a review in Apple Podcasts or subscribe wherever you listen. Feel free to share the podcast on social media using the hashtag GSPodcasts. Thanks so much.